Well, if I had a slice of pie in front of me, I'd definitely be eating that slice of humble pie after what we had to go through this past Sunday. But let's get into it. All right, welcome into a new episode of the Zero Technique Football Podcast. I am your co-host Ryan Stern. Join with me as always, Derek Mountain. We are from backsportspage.com. Derek, man, that was supposed to be one of the better Super Bowls that we were ever going to experience, and it did not turn out that way.
I couldn't have been more wrong about my prediction. I either was thinking in my head, Chiefs blowout, too much speed, they're just on another planet offensively, or if it's close, maybe the Bucks squeak it out, and they're anchored by the trenches on both sides of the football. In no world, no universe where I thought if this game played a million times, it would have played out like the way it did. I was shocked. I was so shocked to see how the Chiefs lost. It was crazy.
Yeah. So that was definitely one of the least expected outcomes that we were looking at. We will do a deep dive into Super Bowl 55. Going to open up with a little bit of other news in the NFL. You can follow me on Twitter at rstern33. Derek is at Derek Mountain. Follow at Backsportspage on all social media. Go to backsportspage.com for all the great stuff that's going up. You can also find the archives to all of our shows, as well as the other great web shows and podcasts that Backsports Page is putting up. So the first bit of news that we have to dive into is out of your neck of the woods in Philly, and the rumors are hot and heavy that any day it could be announced that Carson Wentz should be traded from Philadelphia. What a turn of events.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start with this one. I mean, when they brought on Nick Sirianni as their head coach, the initial thought for me, at least, is he sold them on being a Frank Reich assistant, that he could fix Carson Wentz. He's a cheaper, young, and hungry guy that could kind of take up this challenge of fixing their franchise quarterback. And it is not a desirable cap situation that they go into next year, withstanding whatever they do with Carson Wentz. They have the second worst cap situation in football going into next year, just in front of the Saints. And then to pile on what could be the biggest dead cap hit in NFL history, it would be a $34 million dead cap hit. So for perspective, Goff, who just got traded, was a $23 million dead cap hit for the LA Rams. So the Eagles would be a 50% increase of the biggest dead cap hit in NFL history. So I mean, all that tells me if he does get moved is that the salary cap is a myth, and that if owners really want to pay guys on other teams and they're willing to kind of backload all these contracts and figure out ways to restructure guys and make it work, then that's going to be the new norm in the NFL. But I don't know. I don't know what to take of these rumors because you hear so much. To me, it's kind of Howie and his circle driving up the price. I think it's an attempt to drive up the price and see what they could get for Carson because, I mean, to me, I kind of think you have to roll with him, in my opinion.
And it's especially when you're looking at the return package that's been rumored. And, of course, rumors are that for a reason. We don't know exactly what's going on the inside, but there are some people that may have an ear inside the rooms. And the package that I keep hearing is to Chicago for a first rounder, Tariq Cohen, and Nick Foles. And if I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan, that would make me absolutely sick to my stomach after seeing what the Lions were able to get in return for Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, I mean, Howie has admitted to clinging on to these veterans too long, overpaying them, kind of resting on his laurels almost that, yeah, we won in 2017 and maybe I was a little bit too attached to that roster. And now they're reaping the repercussions now. I mean, you're seeing a lot of these older veteran guys that just are on a huge decline really fast. Alshon, Deshaun, Fletcher Cox, Lane Johnson, guys that aren't in the same shape they were in 2017. And to even consider the thought of bringing back Nick Foles, one of the worst contracts in football, more controversy in Philadelphia. I mean, why would you even consider that? It's mind-boggling to me that they would. I mean, who knows? Maybe that's not a real consideration, but if that rumor is real, I mean, Howie's not learning his lesson.
I mean, if you're making this move, you're making it to move on from Carson Wentz and either hand over the reins to Jalen Hurts or utilize the number 6 pick, or maybe even package the number 6 pick plus whatever they would get back in return for Wentz to move up and get one of the maybe their number 2 quarterback, because you have to figure that the number 2 overall pick with the Jets is, unless the Jets are willing to move on from Sam Darnold, and they're going to utilize the number 2 pick on a quarterback, you have to believe that the number 2 pick is going to be available. So it just would, the fact that they would want to bring in that contract and pair him in a room with Jalen Hurts, that's the part that doesn't make sense to me.
No, I mean, if they were to yield a first-round pick for Wentz, that's a win for them, I think. I think it could be a win for both teams. Like, if you're Chicago and you trade the 20th pick for Wentz, you're not going to find someone with the physical traits of Wentz at 20, especially in this year's draft, just in my opinion. But it's also a project. I mean, you're betting on a guy, you're betting on a 2018 or 2019 version of Wentz. I don't think you're going to get 2017 with some of the injuries that have accrued, the torn ACL, the broken back, the concussion. But maybe you get a 2018, 2019 version of him that's a top half of the league guy, borderline top 10 guy. That's worth a first-round pick in the NFL now. But, I mean, the way the Eagles are now, I don't know why, if you get rid of Wentz, why wouldn't you just see what Jalen Hurts is for the next year? And if he's not good enough, then you make other constellations at quarterback in the future. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Is if he doesn't work out, you got to figure that you're going to be in position to take a quarterback.
Exactly.
I don't necessarily think that the entire roster is good enough to where if Jalen Hurts isn't good, to pick up the slack for him. They're going to need totally. Jalen Hurts to be special in order for them to succeed.
Absolutely. The team's a mess.
And then we have the craziness that's going on in Houston, and the stalemate that's going on between Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans. We saw earlier today Jamie Roots, the 20-year president of the Houston Texans, resigns, and you have to figure that all of this that's going on a year after the debacle that was the trade of DeAndre Hopkins, and now what's going on with Deshaun Watson, you have to figure that that's at the forefront.
And now when you see how many guys are driving out, how many guys are leaving, and the absolute power struggle between owner Cal McNair and president of football operations Jack Easterby, and just how much of a power trip these guys are on. And it's really toxic, obviously, but we could have saw this coming all the way back in 2017 when Rick Smith, their general manager at the time, was forced out. Bill O'Brien took the reins, and as a New England Patriots guy, having that history with Easterby, but man, like, as an Eagles fan, I look at this Texans debacle, and my only saving grace is that I'm not a Texans fan. Just with how toxic it's gone over there. I mean, I really still just don't see a Deshaun Watson trade happening at least anytime soon, just because you're never going to yield the return that you should get on a top 3 quarterback like Deshaun Watson, who's 25.
It's unreal that he's still that young and as accomplished as he is.
The only 2 teams I think with the juice to kind of start the talks even are the Jets and the Dolphins. They're both in conference. So if they go on to dominate in conference, you look like an idiot. To me, you keep him, and if he doesn't play for you week 1, then you deal with it then. But do you even really consider trading him?
If a team is going to blow me away, if I can walk out of this with 3 1s and 3 2s, maybe.
But and that might be something they have to consider, just how much they've mortgaged away their future too.
Right, exactly, because it's not like they can even draft his replacement this year. They don't have a pick in the first 2 rounds. They would have to get Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott lucky and find someone, a diamond in the rough in the 3rd round or later, and that just doesn't happen all that often. This is not a team that's built to win right now, so I can see Watson's frustration based on, and we didn't even talk about the who they even decided to bring in as a head coach. They bring in David Culley, who's the vaunted passing game coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens, because that you had to snag that guy up.
My gosh, I'm just remembering our conversations about the Ravens and the frustrations with their offense. The offense the past 2 years, they didn't really correct their Achilles heel when they lost to the Titans in the divisional round 2 years ago. They come back, they run it back this year. Similar issues when it gets tough against the Bills. They can't throw the ball. And we're talking, it's just if they got a new passing game coordinator, they got a little more creative, because I think Greg Roman's run game, it's a strong suit. And I think the read option that they have with Lamar and their rushing attack, it's the best rushing attack in football the last 2 years. Obviously not something they have to address. But the passing game is a pretty big Achilles heel. And I see David Culley get hired. It's this is a guy running their passing game, and he's 65. I don't know, man. I think he's 65. He's been an NFL assistant for 30 years, since the 90s. He's
65.
He's been in every. I'm sure he's dealt with every type of coach. He's been on a bunch of different staffs. He's a seasoned as a guest. I'm sure he's going to garner the players' respect, but it's you're trying to get some excitement in that organization. This is your answer.
Yeah, this is basically okay, Deshaun Watson, your move. They're not doing their part in order to make Deshaun Watson happy.
No.
David Culley cannot be the answer, the long-term answer for this team.
No.
Oh my goodness!
It was such a weird move. And you look at the assistants, especially on Tampa side, but you look at the assistants in the Super Bowl. It's you could have picked 3 different guys in that game. That would be awesome choices.
There's going to be 3 coordinators from the Super Bowl that are going to be head coaches next year.
And they should. They've earned it. And those guys, if the Eagles were to bring on any of those guys, and I know that they interviewed Todd Bowles, and I was a little bit skeptical of Bowles, but the performance he had in the postseason, especially the Super Bowl, he's always been a top 5 defensive coordinator in football. And I think the more that we're seeing him coach now, it's more of a fault on the Jets, his first run, and he deserves another shot at being a head coach. But yeah, back to Culley. You see those coaches in the Super Bowl, and you get Culley. It's man, they're the last team to hire someone. They didn't have to hire Culley when they did. Strange times in Houston, depressing times in Houston.
If you had to place a bet right now, what is the outcome of the Deshaun Watson situation?
I mean, if they don't trade him before the draft, I don't think they'll trade him this year. So I don't think he's going to get traded within the next 2 months. I just don't. I think the talks were extremely hot. He requested a trade. He went public about it. All the stuff on social media and Instagram about his dislike for Houston. And it's obviously palpable. I'm not going to deny that. He obviously doesn't want to be there right now, but the season's 8 months away. So they have 8 months to convince him to play in week 1. That's the way I view it. Just because he's – if you had a fantasy draft of just starting – if every team was scratched up, you're doing a Madden franchise draft, Deshaun Watson's going into the top 5 or top 3 in that draft. Like, he is that valuable. He led the league in passing last year with that dumpster fire of a team. I mean, he's special.
He's probably number 2 for me. Mahomes would be 1. It would be hard to find somebody.
Yeah. If you want to gamble on Herbert or Lawrence, but we know Deshaun Watson's really good.
Right, and the fact that he's only 25. It's not like you're trying to decide between a 21, 22-year-old and a 28, 29-year-old. He's still only 25. You're still going to have
in this NFL,
years of Deshaun Watson, and the fact that he was able to lead the entire, and obviously him having one of the worst defenses in the entire league, if not the worst defense, where he was just getting the ball every 3 minutes and they were always down. So, I mean, he was passing all the time, but he did that with Will Fuller only there for 11 games. He did that with Brandon Cooks making a resurgence back to relevance. No tight end
Darren
Fells and Akins and Randall Cobb as your number 3 at some points. Then it was Kiki Kuti at some points. I mean, that
offensive line, makeshift offensive line, bottom 5 offensive line in football. I mean, it was no run game to help him. I mean, a shadow of David Johnson. We saw glimpses, but
David Johnson was actually decent as a receiver this year.
But no run game, no real ground attack.
You can't have a good run game with that offensive line.
No.
If I had to choose, if I had to make a bet as to what will happen, I would also pick that he doesn't get traded, because the structure of how a player can get fined for not showing up at a training camp, at practices or whatever, is just too strict an actual player. The Texans hold all of the chips in this situation. It's their decision. And again, it would take an absolute monumental offer for me to consider trading. And if I can get 6 picks in the first 2 rounds, that's where I start thinking about it.
But if on the other side of the coin, like, I agree, but if I'm a Bears fan, or if I'm even Dolphins, really, I mean, I still think Tua has a chance to be a good player. We don't really know yet. What would those fans do for capable quarterback play in the last 20 years, right? And how valuable it is. I mean, you see the Final Four this year. It's Rodgers and Brady, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. I mean, especially in the new age NFL, defenses, they still are really important, and we saw the Bucs take over the Super Bowl game, but you have to score. I mean, that's just the new NFL. Especially to get to the Super Bowl, you have to score points. I mean, it's a parameter. You have to have really good quarterback play at this point, unless the rest of your team is set up perfectly, like maybe a 49ers with Jimmy G. But how often does that happen? It's usually the cream of the crop that rises is top quarterbacks. It's no mistake Tom Brady's won 7 Super Bowls.
I guess if I'm Houston and Miami knocks on the door and says, we'll give you Tua, number 3, number 18, give you back your second-round pick this year, and we'll give you a first-rounder next year. So Tua, 3 1s and a 2.
I'm probably jumping on that because I could get Tua. I could draft Penei Sewell at 3. I can have my bookend tackles with Tua for the next 5+ years with Tunsil and Sewell. And then I can build a team with the rest of those picks. I mean, that's probably that would be the offer I would take because I don't see Miami mortgaging their future like that. I don't see Chris Greer or Brian Flores jumping all over that. I think they've been really patient. So if they were to do that, I'd probably take that. But anything short of that, I don't know. These 2 is a top 5 pick. You're getting people are disappointed off him last year. He's coming off a near career-ending injury with his hip. I think last year was just gravy playing him. He got really good experience. He gets an off season now. He gets to go back in the weight room. He gets mini camps, OTAs. Hopefully, I mean, we'll see. Preseason stuff like that, just to build chemistry and get comfortable. And he doesn't have to deal with Chan Gailey. Hopefully, he gets a real coordinator in there, and they actually build around him. There's promise there. You get another top 5 pick. That's a lot. That's a ton to give for Deshaun Watson.
And the crazy part about it is that Miami isn't necessarily giving up a whole lot of their own assets. It's Tua, number 18, and then
the pick that Houston gave
the pick that Houston gave them, and even from next year because they have Houston's next year also. So maybe there's whichever the lower of the 2 picks. So
the DeAndre Hopkins trade was really, really bad, but the Tunsil trade was kind of just as bad.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because of how much they had to give up to get someone who hasn't lived up to.
He's great, but he's not the top left tackle in football, and you had to give him the richest left tackle contract at the time in NFL history. I mean, my God, Bill O'Brien really just got exposed.
Yeah,
in his 9 months of GMing.
All right, well. It's about time to take a deep dive into Super Bowl 55. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers come away with 31-9 victory over the Kansas City Chiefs. The one thing that stood out to me was the complete dominance in the trenches for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and looked up. So if you take the 5 offensive linemen and their front 6 on defense, because they're used, the most commonly used package is the nickel package. So you have the front 6 that are in the trenches. There are 2 players that are outside the 3rd round. It goes to show you how important it is to hit on those top 3 round players. You have at tackles, you have Donovan Smith, Tristan Wirfs. Smith is a 2nd, Wirfs is a 1st. At guards, you have Ali Marpet, a 2nd out of.
He was a 3rd, or he was a 2nd out of Hobart.
A 2nd out of Hobart. You have Kappa, who didn't play, right?
He didn't play in the NFC Championship or the Super Bowl, but I mean, he was playing at a near all-pro level. I mean, he was phenomenal.
And he's a 3rd round pick out of Humboldt State. The only player on that offensive line not in the top 3 is Ryan Jensen, who's a 6th round pick. Then you go over to the defense, and you have Shaquille Barrett, who is an undrafted free agent. But then you have JPP, a first, Ndamukong Suh, a first, Vita Vea, a first, Devin White, a first, Levante David, a second. I mean, when you have that much success on, and obviously they were able to bring in JPP after his stint with the Giants. They were able to bring in Suh after his stint with the Lions and Miami. But they drafted Vita Vea, they drafted Devin White, they drafted Levante David. When you hit that often, this is the result.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk about Jason Light, the way that he has drafted, the way he's constructed this team, because it didn't happen overnight. Everyone's going to talk about they signed Brady, who brought along Gronk, Fournette, AB, and that's great. All those guys scored. They obviously had a huge impact this year, but the core and the meat of this team was built in the draft, as you just said. I didn't
even mention Mike Evans, who was a first round.
Yeah, Godwin second rounder. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I think their take on, you see the thought process of the NFL evolve over the years. So, I think when the Giants beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl twice in that span of a couple years, the big thing in the NFL was acquiring as many pass rushers as possible. Yeah. And it's still constant, but I think we're kind of shifting towards coverage guys a big premium on corners, especially the prevalence of nickel and dime packages and how you're never really in base defense anymore and how much the NFL just passes now. The Bucks did not put a premium on those positions just in terms of investment. I mean, Shaq Barrett and JPP are two outstanding defensive ends, one of the better tandems in football. Shaq Barrett was a free agent signing. They signed him for 1 year, $4 million off Denver. He was backing up DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller. He had one of the higher pressure rates per snap in the NFL as a rotational guy. They take a gamble on him. He gets 19 and a half sacks last year. They tag him this year. He's phenomenal again. He doesn't have quite those numbers, but the impact he had in the playoffs and the Super Bowl was unbelievable. JPP, they get for a third rounder. They get for nothing. I mean, that was a money dump on the Giants' part. They resurrect his career. Vita Vea with the 12th pick at nose tackle. I mean, nose tackles don't go that high anymore. Devin White as a top 5 pick at inside linebacker. I mean, I think some people's heart just drops if they take a linebacker in the first round now. They took the approach of best player available. I mean, Wirfs was a home run this year at right tackle. Antoine Winfield was a home run at safety in the second round, but you're seeing those guys in the interior of their offensive line, like you just mentioned. I mean, that's the best interior offensive line in football by far. Guard to guard, they're all Pro Bowl caliber players. The construction of this team is really impressive. Light hit on every single top 3 round pick past 3-4 years. I mean, we talked about Wirfs and Antoine Winfield. They kind of spanned at defensive back where they got Sean Murphy-Bunting, Jamel Dean, Jordan Whitehead, all within the span of 2 years. Carlin Davis in that same time frame. I mean, all those guys hit. Literally all those guys hit. Antoine Winfield this year. Really impressive. I mean, the one guy you could maybe say didn't hit was Keyshawn Vaughn, but I also think he's a to be determined. He had 100 yards this year. He didn't really play. They didn't really need him to play. But besides that, I mean, the way that they drafted.
When they drafted Keyshawn Vaughn, they obviously didn't expect Leonard Fournette to be a part of the game plan this year. So I think once they were able to land Fournette, it sort of changed how they were going to utilize Keyshawn Vaughn. And to be honest, I think I thought that he was one of the most raw players that was taken in the draft last year. The fact that he was able to really take a back seat, learn from a Leonard Fournette, watch what happens with a Ronald Jones, and learn under LaShawn McCoy, and just get used to this system. I think that could only bode well for the future for him.
I think he has a perfect chance to be the James White to Tom Brady next year. He has the perfect chance to be that scat back in that offense, because that's the one thing I think they're kind of lacking on the offensive side of the football. And Fournette caught the ball great in the playoffs. He didn't necessarily do that in the regular season. Him and Ronald Jones had their struggles in the passing game. I think that's what Keyshawn Vaughn's role can be next year. So I'm not even going to say that he didn't hit necessarily with that pick. I mean, they had a Super Bowl core with this team last year that went 7-9 with Jameis Winston. I mean, it's crazy to think about, but it's true. They put the finishing touches on the team. I think Brady's charisma and his presence, along with his productivity, just raised everybody else's level. But I mean, the meat of this team, it was there. It was a Super Bowl contender all along. It's really impressive.
Yeah, it goes to show what a 30 interception quarterback, how a 30 interception quarterback can
Really, yeah.
get back. So let's dive into this and what went right for the Buccaneers, what went wrong for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm going to start with the Chiefs because I think we didn't take into consideration enough how much the missing of their two offensive tackles with Eric Fisher, Mitchell Schwartz, with them not in the picture, we're going to be on Patrick Mahomes, who was clearly not 100% in this game.
Yeah, so totally underestimated, as you just said. I mean, they had three guys move around. They moved Remmers from right tackle to left tackle, and he had never played there before. They moved Andrew Wiley from right guard to right tackle, and they inserted Stefan Wisniewski, who hadn't logged a start this year. That's three new starters. Not only is it underwhelming in terms of talent, but it's such, I mean, continuity is everything. Communication is everything in terms of an offensive line and a unit and just being comfortable playing next to certain guys. So, like, I know they had 2 weeks to prepare for it. It's a really well-coached team, but as much as Kansas City likes to sit back and drop back and rely on their five-step game, as much as they do and Mahomes kind of creating back there, it was a recipe for disaster. It was not optimal to the way they want to play.
And you brought up the word continuity, and I know you had brought up the Giants and when they beat the Patriots. The first time they beat them, so in Super Bowl 42, the 2007 season, they had the offensive line of David Deal, Rich Seubert at guard, center was Sean O'Hara, Chris Snee, and Kareem McKenzie. That group of five played all but one snap together that entire season.
Yeah, I mean, that never happens either. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, I've never heard that before. That's crazy. Yeah. I mean, that never happens in the NFL. I mean, we saw Kappa was out and Stinney came in, but you need some luck. I mean, the Bucs were relatively really healthy. And I think of the offensive line, as you just said, like having that continuity, having that comfortability playing with certain guys, it's not talked about enough. It's clearly something that we underestimated, me especially. I mean, and just going against that defensive line, it was a nightmare. It was a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, and just to compound that with the fact that it was clear that Patrick Mahomes wasn't 100%. Dealing with the turf toe, he's going to have surgery on it. Just so that he'll be ready for the start of next year. But it almost goes to show how amazing of an athlete Patrick Mahomes is, because you could tell he wasn't 100%, and he was still the most efficient rusher on their team on Sunday. Travis Kelce had the quietest 10 for 133 in Super Bowl.
He didn't play well, and he broke the yardage record for tight ends in the Super Bowl. Like, he didn't play well.
No,
that's how good that guy is.
Oh my goodness! So I don't know if I know we got into it sort of near the end of the season, but when we were talking about the fantasy structure of the tight ends, and so he ended up with almost 70 points more than Darren Waller, who was number 2, and Darren Waller was 74 points higher than Robert Tonyan, who is number 3. This is and half-point scoring. So just that he had almost 150 more fantasy points than number 3. That
He
goes.
was the leading receiver in the NFL going into Week 17. Then they benched their starters. I mean, he very well was probably going to be crowned the receiving leader, get the receiving title in the NFL as a tight end.
He's a cheat code. He really is.
He is. I mean, he is always open. Zone, he's always open. Man, he's always going to get separation, whether it's a little nickel, it's a corner, it's a linebacker, it's a safety. Like, it literally doesn't matter. I mean, we talked about it. He made Denzel Ward fall, a top 5, top 7 corner in the NFL. Made him fall in the divisional round.
He's either too big or too fast.
Exactly. I mean,
and sometimes both.
Now, what I want to talk about, I mean, Tyreek Hill could not be found that game. They completely neutralized him.
Yep.
And watching the replay of that game, they were the second drive where they scored the touchdown. I thought was their best drive in terms of script. It was more diverse than what we saw later in the game. They had a reverse to Tyreek. They had an inside zone RPO, a rollout to the left, move in the pocket to help alleviate that pressure for the offensive line. They had an offensive guard tight end counter to Edwards-Helaire. Like, it was a nice drive, stalled out, get the field goal. But after that, it was nothing but dropbacks. They didn't really use Tyreek Hill in motion as much as they do, whether in terms of eye candy or outflanking the defense, trying to get him the ball in space. They didn't give him any easy touches. And I mean, credit to Todd Bowles, because that was as masterful as a defensive schemed game as I've ever seen at that level. I mean, it was perfect. I mean,
it reminded you of Spagnuolo against the 07 Patriots. That's what it felt like.
It really did, because all year long, they were a single high team, blitz a bunch, kind of bring the game to you. Instead, they sat back. They were in too high shell over 80% of the snaps, which is just not what Todd Bowles wants to do at all.
Right.
And I think they brought more than 4 rushers on 7 snaps, on 7 passes. Like,
they didn't.
I mean, no.
Because of the effectiveness of the front 4 to put pressure on Mahomes. And how many times did Mahomes not even look up and he's running backwards?
The one play where it was going into halftime, it was 14-3, and they had a trips look with Kelsey on the backside, and it was the reverse whip that made Denzel Ward fall. They ran it 2 weeks earlier, and he was wide open, but there was Shaq Barrett and JPP in Mahomes' face when he caught the ball, when he caught it in his drop back. I mean, it was unbelievable. It's just stuff like that. Like, they didn't have time to kind of develop those long pass routes down the field. They didn't have any sort of rhythm. It felt like when they went to the run game in the third quarter, it was just too late. It was just a lost game. I mean, in terms of rhythm and flow for Andy Reid, he just completely lost it, I thought.
Speaking of Andy Reid, I have a bone to pick with him.
I know where this is going.
Going into the end of the first half, this is where I thought the entire game turned.
Yeah, I agree.
Tampa, they kick a field goal to make it 14-6, about a minute left, and Tampa's willing to go into the half at 14-6. They run the ball once. What was it?
0-yard game.
Right.
0-yard game.
And Andy Reid decides to call a timeout. Next play, a 9-yard gain. So now it's 3rd and 1, and he calls the timeout there. That it cannot be a timeout, because now they're a yard away from really giving themselves momentum, and we saw what ended up happening. They end up going down the field after a very questionable pass interference.
I mean, you're right. So I had the exact same thought where if you're Andy Reid, though, you can't even leave it up to chance.
No,
Last week, we
no.
saw the
Right.
Buccaneers flip the Packers game by getting that Scotty Miller touchdown before the half, where Bruce Arians' mindset, he doesn't care. It's no risk and no biscuit. He's there to win. He doesn't care. He's going to throw the football down the field. He's not going to change the way that he plays offensively, especially when Gronk got that first down, that 3rd and 1 there at the 40. At that point, he's playing with house money, I mean, if you're Andy Reid, it's like, dude, you're down by 1 possession. You're getting the ball at half, regroup. You played a terrible half, and you're still only down by 8.
Yeah.
And that touchdown at the end of the half was such a backbreaker. It was
have to be okay with just getting to the half.
It was greedy.
It's one thing if you have the ball. If you have the ball, then you can determine the pace of the game. When it's not in your hands, you have to be willing to just accept what is already there. And I'm definitely not this pissed because I had 4-6 in my box pool and it cost me $250. This is from an NFL analysis point of view at how, and it's amazing how great of a coach Andy Reid can be, and he's one of the worst time management.
I was going to say, it literally gave me PTSD from his Eagles days, and I think he got exploited a lot more as the Eagles coach in terms of timeout management, clock management, end of games, because he didn't have Patrick Mahomes. He's not necessarily in those situations as much, and Mahomes and that offense are going to bail him out regardless of what he decides to do. And he has improved. I'm not taking anything away from him, but in a game of that magnitude, that close, you just bite the bullet. You take the 8-point deficit going into half. I didn't understand what he was doing at all at the time. It was really, really puzzling.
Oh man, that the fact that, I mean, obviously, I'm also looking at it from a fact that was not the way to handle timeouts. Wasn't the way to handle the clock. As I said, it's much different when the ball is in your hands, and you can then determine the pace of the play. We also saw 2 weeks ago in the Green Bay game that Matt LaFleur put the game in the hands of Tom Brady, and we saw what Tom Brady was able to do, and to just he was able to determine what happened for the rest of the game, and he just didn't learn. Tom Brady didn't have an overwhelming game.
It was efficient.
He was as efficient as it can be. He didn't have
That's all it was.
Because the defense was able to keep putting the ball in their hands. Leonard Fournette ran the ball much better than I thought he would have been able to. I thought it would have been potentially more of a Ronald Jones game. But, it was just an absolute brilliant game plan, offensively and defensively, by Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I want to talk about Byron Leftwich. I mean, I feel like he really grew up in the postseason because over the course of the regular season, I think it was kind of frustrating to watch them at times. I think they started to click at the end of the year, but seeing who they were going against, you're wondering if it was fool's gold. I mean, there was the Lions Thanksgiving game. That was a joke. Playing the Falcons twice. You weren't really sure if it was real or not. And you got a taste of it against Washington. It's a legit defense. But I feel like once they hit that second half in New Orleans, they had a new urgency about them. And they were much more flexible than they were in the regular season. In the regular season, it seemed like they were kind of just throwing stuff against the wall and being really stubborn in their approach, especially in terms of their utilization of Brady, kind of making him a down-the-field thrower, reading the field from vertical to down instead of down to up, like he was accustomed to in New England. Over the course of the postseason, it was a lot cleaner, I thought, a lot more flexible, a lot more play-action stuff, a lot easier reads for him, left to right, full field reads, getting the ball out quick. Just easy stuff for Brady to to get the ball out of his hands, a lot more of a balanced attack. To me, I thought they were really impatient as well at times. I mean, I thought they were dropping Brady back way too much in the middle part of the season when they had lost 3 out of 4 games to Kansas City, New Orleans, that kind of rough patch that they had before the bye week. They went back to running the football, and that was as balanced an attack as you'll see in the Super Bowl. I mean, what was it, 130 yards on the ground, 196, 198 through the air. Play action was buzzing. Fournette and Ronald Jones were carving them up on the ground. It was awesome. It was awesome to watch, and I give all the credit to Byron Leftwich, and that's because Arians really gave the reins over to Byron Leftwich in terms of the offense. When Tom Brady's going to the sideline, he's going to Leftwich. That's the guy calling the plays. And I give a ton of credit to Arians. He really took a CEO type role. He was kind of this offensive guru. Pittsburgh, Indy, Arizona, he saw success at every single stop. Comes to Tampa Bay, and his one condition is that he needs to bring along Byron Leftwich to call the plays. And I think there were rough patches, especially last year and some parts of this year, but he grew up really fast. It was really flexible, really versatile offense. They beat you in so many different ways. It was really fun to watch, and he should be a top 3 coaching candidate next year. He has to be, the way that he called offense in the postseason, to me.
So I was on the Rob Gronkowski media availability during media day last week, and he brought up the fact that the week 13 bye was as well placed for them as it could have been. He said that they were throwing things up against the wall for the first 12 weeks of the season. He said that they went into the bye and came out of the bye and said, we now know, we have 12 games of data and experience of what we know we can do. And we've tried things that have worked. We've tried things that didn't work. We now know what works. This is what we're going to do. And the fact that they came out of the bye and they didn't lose a game.
No.
Their last game before the bye was the game against Kansas City, and they go into the bye and they run the table afterwards. So there are some teams who struggle coming out of byes. I'm not going to say the Giants, but the Giants. It's crazy how, I mean, even since Tom Coughlin, the Giants' putrid play coming out of the byes is just absolutely sickening to me. But these good teams.
That's coaching. I mean, that's an ability to self-scout, get tendencies, go against the grain, and figure out what you're good at. And I think one of the things that they figured out they were good at is play action, more balance, lean on the run game a little bit more outside of first down. That stuff was just so helpful, so critical to their success at the end of the day. I mean, watching that game, they go 3 and out the first 2 drives, and once Brady hit that play action, that comeback to AB on the sideline that started that first touchdown, they did whatever they wanted. I mean, after that, it was touchdown, the goal line stand on the 1 where they should have scored, touchdown to that was the 2 PIs to Evans before the half. AB scores on the 1.
Yeah.
Kansas City gets the field goal out of the half. Doesn't matter. They score in 3 minutes. Leonard Fournette gets the long touchdown. I mean, they weren't stopped. I mean, it's Kansas City. They were so defeated. Their defense was just so defeated. They knew that whatever they were going to do wasn't going to work just because of everything was working that the Buccaneers were doing. They could do whatever they wanted to do.
It was an absolute masterful game plan. Once they were able to get their feet underneath them, and again, that call on the first touchdown to Gronkowski, I mean, to have what was that? It was inside the 10, right? It was about a 5-yard touchdown. To have somebody that wide open on on a play from the 5-yard line means that's about play calling. That's about play design. That's about doing the things you need as a group of 11 to do them right in order to get someone that wide open. I mean, that just, it was such a beautiful play call.
And it's little subtle wrinkles. I mean,
Right.
it's nothing like revolutionary. It's not like stuff they haven't run. I think back to the NFC Championship against the Packers. They run duo insert with Chris Godwin 5-6 times a game, where they're bringing him in that late motion. He kind of comes behind the tight end and inserts in the C and D gap, and they run duo behind him. Against the Packers, they use the exact same look. He acts like he's blocking. He leaks, gets 20 yards, propels them to a touchdown in the second half. I mean, just little subtle stuff like that, and the Gronk touchdown. It was inside zone. They run inside zone slice with Gronk coming across a bunch. And this time, Brady pulls it. He just ducks into the flat. He's wide open. I mean, it's just little subtle wrinkles and progressions off these plays. That's what the best offenses do. They have progressions. They have stuff in their back pocket. They have answers to what the defense is going to do. And I don't know if I've ever seen a team like the Bucs kind of hold so much in their pocket towards the end, towards the Saints game, Packers, and then the Super Bowl offensively and defensively. And it's a credit to the coaching staff. I mean, they coach their butts off. It was really fun to watch.
One point that you had made just a couple minutes ago was the fact that they were able to sustain success on running the ball outside of first down. How many times did we see them run the ball on first down and it go for a 1, maybe a 2-yard gain? And usually when that happens, it's automatically pass after that. Pass. How many times did we see second down go for 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 yards?
Staying ahead of the sticks.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's a term that has really come into play this year. How many drives are able to sustain success when you lose yardage based on a play design or a penalty? It's so important. Third and manageable is as important as first.
And when you're going against a balanced attack like the Bucs, where you don't know if they're going to run or pass, or if it's going to be play action, or if it's going to be a slip screen to Brate that broke off for 20 yards. I mean, they could beat you so many different ways. They could go in 12 personnel. They can go bring in a 6 offensive lineman. They brought in Joe Hagelot as a complimentary piece in the run game. I mean, and they have 3 superstar receivers.
Touchdown. I mean, that was a great play by Hitchens, because that should have been a touchdown, but it was just a perfectly timed punch. But how many times did we see Brady throw the ball to Mike Vrabel in a Super Bowl? I mean,
that's exactly what it was.
Yeah,
and
it was that same exact play call.
Once Brate flexed out, I was like, oh no, like I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to do like a little pop or something. And they did it. And it was Hitchens' recovery was great. They had him. I mean, he was wide open. And now it's funny that they won the game. And I'm sure the Buccaneer, his teammates are going to bust on Hag for the end of time, because that ended up being a goal line stand. That was a really big play at the time. Yeah. But now it didn't really matter over the course of the game. They got the ball back at like the 40 and scored anyway. But yeah, I mean, the moxie to call that kind of, I mean, I love it. That was awesome. Byron Leftwich was playing house money there. It was great.
The last point that I want to bring up before we wrap things up is Tyrann Mathieu. Did not have a good game. And he proceeded to go out and start taunting after allowing a touchdown.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
What you were expecting from Tyrann Mathieu was the leadership, and you did not get the leadership or the on field play from Tyrann Mathieu when you needed him the most. That was as disappointing as anything else that you could have expected from Kansas City.
When he had the interception that was overturned for the defensive holding, it just felt like the game slipped out of his hands after that because it
And
just seemed like a really emotional game for him.
so, what was that holding, or was it pass interference? Because it was placed at the 1.
No, I'm talking about the one that was deflected at the line of scrimmage and
the interception.
And I think it was holding on Breland on the outside. He was holding Evans, who Brady was trying to throw to, and it got deflected at the line. Yeah. And after that, it seemed like Matthew was like out of his game. The pass interference with Evans at the goal line that you just said, that put the ball on the 1 right before halftime. It just seemed like he was really invested in what the refs had to call. It was a terrible call. I'm not going to stand up for the refs.
That ball was 32 feet over Evans' head.
Exactly.
You absolutely cannot call. I mean,
it's not why they lost the game, though.
No, because it ended up being a 9-yard penalty. They were still within the 10.
Exactly.
There's still a decent chance that they score a touchdown, but that was a brutal call, and there was a couple, and in typical conspiracy theory fashion, they all went Brady's way.
I'll digress with the refs. So I'll go back to Matthew, but with the refs, the only thing I need to see, and I think there have been some really spotty reffing performances across the league this year, but they just have to get a lot more consistent with defensive holding and DPI. You just have to. I mean, you saw it in the Packers game, the impact that it had, how physical the D-backs could get away with it could be at times, and then they couldn't be at the end of the game. And then the Super Bowl, where the most ticky-tack fouls are called. I mean, there just needs to be consistency. I don't know how you hold these refs accountable, but just something needs to be done. They're obviously not going to uphold the challenge system that we tried for a year. That's not going to work. I don't know what the NFL does to address it, but it had an impact on that game in the first half. The Chiefs aren't winning that game. I mean, regardless, they're just not. They were completely outplayed in that game, but it had an impact on the time. Back to Matthew. It just felt like he was super emotional in a bad way. It just seemed like he took himself out of the game. He was too invested in the refs.
Let his emotions get to him.
Exactly. And then it felt like all the life was sucked out of him in the second half when the Buccaneers were just moving the ball at will and they were worn down clearly. And at those times where Matthew has shined, I mean, he's such a great leader. He's the emotional leader of this team, and he comes up with big play after big play in these big spots, and he was nowhere to be found in the Super Bowl.
No, but who was able to be found were the entire Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Congratulations to that organization. I tweeted, I said, I'm really happy for Bruce Arians. When you talk about
he was out of football 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it is quite the story. I don't think people realize that, but like this guy didn't want to come back and coach. It had to be the perfect situation. He got Leftwich to come along with him. It fell in place perfectly, and as you said, he is so deserving of this.
Yeah, when it comes to good guys in the NFL, there aren't many that are going to top Bruce Arians. So awfully happy for him. So it's going to wrap it up for this week. Again, make sure you're checking out backsportspage.com for all the great stuff that's going on up there. And next week we start with draft talk, and this is my favorite part of the year. As much as I love the actual playing season and fantasy draft season, the 2.5 months between the Super Bowl and the NFL draft are as exciting, if not more exciting, to me than any other. So I can't wait to be able to really dive deep into watching film on on a quarterback who's going to be taken in the top 10, who in 15 of his 17 games did not throw the ball more than 23 times. This is the stuff that I live for. So I can't wait to start really diving in deep with the draft. Where again, and Rich Eisen says it the best. There is no in season and off season in the NFL. It's just the playing season and the non-playing season.
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. The off season's just as fun, if not more fun. I mean, there's so much anticipation. There's hope for just about every team, unless you're a Texans fan. But you always, yeah, exactly. You have the draft to look forward to. There's free agency, and I think this year, I mean, the constraints that the pandemic put on free agency is going to be a whole new ballgame in free agency and how certain teams have to handle their spending. It's going to be really interesting. It's going to be really fun. I mean,
for the first time, and I can remember, there's talks about the salary cap even dropping.
Yeah, I think they're pretty set on it being between 180 and 185, which would be about an 11 to 16 $million decrease.
Yeah,
and every year we're just used to these 10 and $15 million increases. I think it could be as high as 225 million in 2 or 3 years. But for the next year or two, this is the new reality that we have to deal with. So it's going to be fun how these teams kind of backload, restructure contracts. I think we're going to see a ton of veterans cut because of it. I mean, you already saw today, A.J. Boye got cut on Denver. I think we're going to see a lot of big names on the move. I really do, because that's how teams have to overcome this stuff.
Yep. Can't wait. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for us. Make sure you're checking us out. Subscribe, whether it be on Facebook or on YouTube, to Backsports page so you can get notifications whenever we go live or any of the other great Backsports page web shows go live. Derek, we'll have a week to digest and get back into the new 2021 season, because again, we just keep going here.
Non-playing week 1. Circle your calendars.
Non-playing week 1. Love it. All right, so that's going to wrap it up. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will catch you next week. Derek, have a good one.
You too.